Hello again. We are Southeastern 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Blake Lovell and Gavin Schoenwald, who's back after a week's worth of vacation. Hope everybody out there doing well, maybe some of you better than others. After an SEC weekend that was sometimes unpredictable, sometimes not always pretty, but mostly interesting. And so, with that, welcome everybody into the show today. As always, we will look at your comments, take your questions, talk about some things that you want to talk about. Of course, we've got some things planned today. We'll get into Florida's big win over Tennessee, Missouri's big win over Kansas State, the significance of both those things. Might talk a little bit about quarterback situations in the Yellowhammer State, all kinds of stuff to get into. But Blake, I want to start with you. Lots of stuff happened this weekend. What stood out or surprised you the most?
Well, this is a teaser. If you want to know what stood out the most for Chris Lee and Blaine Gilmer, we've got a video up on the channel with their thoughts on that. But what surprised me, I don't know. There's a huge surprise necessarily. Look, we all thought Tennessee could lose the game. I was surprised maybe with how bad they looked at times in terms of just the overall performance. And maybe on the flip side of that, maybe surprised at how well Florida did certain things that they had not done to that point. But yeah, I don't. I guess I hate to keep going back to this one, but it's like Alabama's just inability to do anything offensively is probably I would rank above everything else because we all thought this was the big bounce back spot where they'd come out and put up 40 or more against South Florida, but they struggled to a 17-3 win, and the offense just did not look good. So I'd probably go with that one, Chris, as the top ranking one. But if you're talking surprise, certainly have to throw in some bits and pieces from Florida and Tennessee, probably.
Yeah, I think really interesting weekend overall, and I think it's kind of following a trend, if we're being honest, of the SEC hasn't really had that strong of the first 3 weeks, and that's been a little bit alarming as a former player, but also I'm sure as current players, and we're so used to seeing 2 SEC teams in the playoff by the end of the year. Is that something that we're going to see this year as well? I'm not really sure, but I think overall, Blake, I agree with you. I think the Alabama game, they win, but as we all know, the standard that was not the Alabama standard, and that was definitely a little alarming. But for me, I'm in a 2-week span, we saw LSU go from dominated to dominate another SEC team, and Jaden Daniels was terrific, especially in the first half. And when LSU can get elite play like that, the quarterback position, they can fill every other hole on the roster. And so I was really impressed with them. Now, is Mississippi State as good as they've been in previous years? I don't think so. They took Arizona to overtime last week and just didn't really feel like they had any rhythm on offense. And that's a little bit alarming with a veteran quarterback like Will Rogers. So LSU really, really impressed me overall. But I think that, as a whole, I think that, the SEC has some work to do if they want to get two teams for sure in the college football playoff by the end of the year.
Yeah, I was surprised that Florida beat Tennessee. I've been adamant all along. I thought Tennessee would win that game comfortably. That is not what happened. Some other things we haven't gotten into. You look at coaches when things get in that dicey territory where teams are winning 6, 7 games a year, and fans in the SEC get antsy for a little bit more. And you saw a couple of coaches this weekend where it went one way for some and it went another way for others. Of course, Billy Napier at Florida, I don't know if hot seat is the right term, but certainly under pressure from fans. Big win for Billy Napier. Kind of changes the complexion of the season. Suddenly maybe losing to Utah does not look as bad, given that Florida got some health on the offensive line that it didn't have then. Eli Drinkwitz, huge win for Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz. Probably the biggest SEC feather in the cap so far was Missouri's win over Kansas State. I cannot think of a team in this league that has gotten a better win than K-State. So I think those are 2 coaches and 2 fan bases that exit the weekend feeling better about the state of things. I think you nailed it, Gavin, with LSU. I think that I thought that everybody was overreacting to that loss to Florida State. And I get why when it got a little lopsided there at the end, why people felt that way, but it was week one. Brian Kelly, I thought, answered the bell in a big way this weekend. Now, three coaches that I'm worried about in different ways this weekend. You had the other end of LSU's game, that's Mississippi State's. I feel a little badly for Zach Arnett. When you take Mike Leach's offense, you either have to marry to it and keep it going throughout. At some point, you have to start to unwind that. And when you start to unwind it, you could have some issues. We're seeing those. Number two, Sam Pittman. I think that Arkansas fans, you saw it, Blake, in our Saturday night show. We're not happy at all with what happened losing to BYU. Was that a game that I think Arkansas should have lost? Probably not. I would have thought that Sam Pittman would have built up a little bit more goodwill than maybe he has, but 7-6 last season put them right in that middle spot where they're wanting and thinking they should get a little bit more. Didn't get it this weekend. Third one, Clark Lee at Vandy. I thought Vanderbilt should have handled UNLV easily this weekend. It did not. I thought the manner in which Vanderbilt lost was concerning. Gavin, you were at the game. I'm sure we could spend some time on that one, but those were kind of maybe some takeaways that I had, piggybacking on the ones that you guys had, and some thoughts of my own. But let's recap some things this weekend. I thought Florida's win over Tennessee, Blake, was super impressive. We talked about game flow going into that if Florida could get an early lead, you could run the clock, you could do some ball control, which against Tennessee is very important. We talked about Tennessee or Florida having only allowed 47 offensive snaps a game to its opponents coming in. Florida got the game control script right off the bat that it wanted and just kind of cruised from there, Blake.
Yeah, I mean, what do we say coming the season? What's the strength of this Florida team? We said there were a couple big strengths. This was the thing. If they were going to be really good, they had to lean on, in my opinion, two guys in particular, and that was the two running backs. Like, I think it's, and one night it may be one guy, one night it may be the other. I mean, it was Etienne's night then, right? 23 carries, 172 yards, and touchdown. I mean, that we said, I think if you had to pick, I think you asked me the question, Chris, somewhere along the line, who's the MVP on this Florida team? I said, take your pick, one of those two guys. And so, yeah, like you mentioned, is the way the game unfolded, it worked out perfectly to where they can lean on their two guys offensively, I think, that are as big of weapons as they have. And again, two of the better ones in the league, just based on, we're talking about them potentially hitting 1,000 yards each or combined numbers and all that going the season. I mean, that was always going to be the thing. So, yeah, I mean, Florida answered the bell. And yes, there's something to the fact that, the streak that still continues in Gainesville, but sure, I'm sure that's part of it. Just the voodoo that seems to be on Tennessee anytime they head to the swamp. But at the same time, yeah, Florida deserves a ton of credit for what they did here. And we talk about line play and all that and the importance. And we've been on some teams about line play in the SEC and all of that. But yeah, they completely took it to what we thought was one of the strengths of this Tennessee defense. And Florida just really took it to them here in this game. So,
yeah, I think you couldn't have drawn it up more perfect for Billy Napier in Florida, to be honest with you. And I remember Chris sitting on the show, and we talked a lot about how, especially right after the Utah game, how Billy Napier's not in a great spot. This Florida team doesn't look like what the Florida standard can be. This is a ginormous win for him and his staff and for the morale of his players going forward. And I've shared on here as well where I love my favorite place to play. It's also the toughest place to play is the Swamp in the SEC in my experience. Not only that game was at night and it was sold out. And that's really, really, that's an uphill climb for Tennessee, really for any team. And so, but you're right. It's they won, but it's also the way they won. They dictated the terms of the game, and that does not happen to Tennessee and Heupel's offense. They dictated the terms. They controlled the ball. They exposed Tennessee. And, I think that this was a little bit of a wake-up call because with Tennessee, we talked about, last year was an absolute magical season for Tennessee. It was. And the reason why is because they got terrific elite quarterback play out of Hendon Hooker every single game. Joe Milton wasn't horrible. He wasn't great, but he wasn't horrible. There's a lot of other things Tennessee needs to fix. But the reason that Tennessee was in and gave him a chance of winning every single game last year is because Hendon Hooker was terrific. And if that's where Tennessee wants to go, Heupel's offense is run through the quarterback, through and through. If Milton can play at an elite level, they'll have a chance to win every single game on their schedule. He played fine. He didn't play great, and Tennessee ended up losing the game. But I think overall that's huge for Florida. It is. And now, like, as viewers, as us, and I'm sure other people out there, you maybe circle that Georgia game a little bit more, especially with how they looked, the opening 3 weeks. They haven't looked like the dominant two-time back-to-back champion they have. They're still 3-0. They're still the number one team in the country, and they probably should be until someone beats them. But we circle that game a little bit. There's some other ones as well. And so, I think, like I said, we sat on here about a week or two ago, and I said that this Tennessee game is a must-win for Billy Napier. And not only did they win it, but they won it in comfortable fashion, dictating terms against Tennessee, which we haven't seen since Heupel got there.
Yeah, how concerned are we for Tennessee going forward? Joe Milton's been under a microscope, hasn't really helped himself so far. You had an offensive line suspension. I don't think it was announced before the game, but surfaced after the game. There was a possession incident with an offensive lineman. It was kind of a platoon guy. I've gone blank on the name, but in any case, you got that. You got the line under fire for not blocking well enough. Are we? I mean, and I'll tell you, my first reaction was that how in the world was Hendon Hooker not in New York last year? I mean, I think now it's a little bit more evident. It's not just a system. The guy that's running it's got a little something to do with it too. But I'm really wondering, guys, Blake, I'll start with you. How does Tennessee pick up the pieces offensively from here?
I don't know. Like you said, I think that's the easy answer to me is I don't know. I mean, again, what's the strength of this Tennessee team? I thought coming into the season, I never really thought the strength of the team offensively, outside of it just being Josh Heupel's offense, and you just expect a lot of good things. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be the quarterback play. I always thought it was going to be the running game because of the guys that they had there. We talked about the three guys, Small, Wright, Sampson. I mean, I thought that was going to be what we were probably going to be talking about if Tennessee ran the table or something and or go 11-1 or whatever it is. Sure, we would have to talk about Milton in that, but I think we continue to say, hey, actually the reason they got here is because of this great running back room, and it may be the best in the SEC and all these things. But I don't know. Anytime you lose this kind of game, you guys know it doesn't matter how you lose it. Usually when you have that conversation coming into the season about, is this guy going to be the real deal? Is he going to be the next big thing? When you lose one of these games like this early in the season, sure, you can look at Joe Milton's numbers and see that he threw a pick, and there were obviously some things that he, accuracy-wise, Blaine's talked about that. But the conversation turns there, right? Like, that's where this conversation this week is. How quick is it going to be before the 5-star freshman comes in and plays, and all these different things? So I don't really know where Tennessee goes from here, I guess, because here's the thing. The reason I said I wasn't surprised, I watched the first half of the Austin Peay game. It was brutal. Tennessee looked awful in that game in the first half. There were times, again, before they really turned on against Virginia, we mentioned in week one, it was all about the running game, right? Joe Milton did some good things, but we talked about, look at what Dylan Sampson did, a couple touchdowns and some of the other things. I mean, I think after the Florida game, you kind of have to reset expectations on quite a few things, and I don't know how much we learned. Their next 3 games are at home, right? So it's going to set up a little bit better scheduling wise. But yeah, I don't have a great answer for that, Chris, because I think it's one where we know where this conversation's going. We know the conversation's already being had. And a lot of it centers on Joe Milton, fair or unfair, even though, like we said, the reason Florida won that game, there are a lot of things outside of him for that. So,
yeah. And I think that's it right there, Blake, is, let's rewind a little bit with what you said, Chris. Absolutely, Hendon Hooker should have been in New York last year, and that's coming from a Vanderbilt guy. I mean, he was absolutely terrific for Tennessee. At the same time, I think we all as bystanders and, when I say that, I mean people not within the program, we thought that it would just be Hooker out, Milton in, and everything would be the same.
Yeah.
That's just not the case here. Let's remember, too, they lost their offensive coordinator to be the head coach at USF. You lose a top 10 pick and a tackle in Darnell Wright to the Chicago Bears in the first round of the draft. You lose an unbelievable receiver, Jalen Hyatt, in the third round of the Giants. And so there's some ginormous pieces just besides Hendon Hooker at quarterback that Tennessee, had to fix. And I think that we all thought that it would just be, like I said, Hooker out, Milton in, and everything's the same. You're missing not only great players, but those guys were leaders for your program and your offense. And that looks a lot different now. And so, I think Tennessee's going to be fine. I really do. And I think that the standard of Tennessee, I don't know if they need to reset their expectations. They just need to maybe reevaluate where they're at offensively, to be honest with you, because we've all seen when they're rolling on offense and they do just enough defensively, they can win a lot of games. And, I think they got to just maybe reset their formula to win is probably the best way to say it. Reset their formula to win. They don't have the star power of the offensive line they had with Darnell Wright. They don't have the huge blazing speeds run by anybody with Hyatt out there. And, I think they just need to reset their approach and their philosophy offensively a little bit. Expectations, I don't think that they need to reset those because still a lot of winnable games on the schedule, a lot of winnable games. And, especially they beat Alabama last year. I'm not saying they're going to beat them this year, but with Alabama, with how they've looked, I mean, that game's it could be a toss-up. Let's be honest. It could be a toss-up this year with the way they're looking. And that's a game that you usually look at the beginning of each year and you say, okay, well, that's kind of an automatic loss, or, the Georgia one is tough. The SEC is wide open, fellas. It's wide open. And, so I think that, in a normal year, you could look at this and be like, man, this is a devastating loss for Tennessee. They lost to Florida, a game they should have won. And we all agree they on paper, they should win that game. They got handled pretty good, but this conference is wide open this year, man. It's a funky year. And, we've only played 3 weeks, so we got a lot of ways to go. And I'm interested to see how all the, pieces fall into place, because a lot of storylines. I mean, we could have a 3-hour show today, to be honest with you. A lot of storylines, but that's why we love college football.
Yeah, and Gerald Mincey was the offensive lineman for Tennessee, whose name I blanked on. I don't think they announced it before the game, but got cited for possession. I think there was an injury situation there too. He's kind of was going to be their right starter at right tackle coming into the season, expected to be. I think started 7 games at tackle a year ago. But let's talk about Florida because everybody overreacted to the Utah game. Look, I know that Utah played its second and third quarterbacks. I know that Utah had a big injury at tight end, but nobody's won in that building or 3 or 4 years. Utah's a perennial conference contender in the Pac-12. And I think what got a little bit overlooked in that loss to Utah is Florida's defensive numbers in that game were pretty good, guys. They gave up the big pass play on the first play of the game. That can happen. You play in an altitude. Florida really had a good bounce back game last week because it was against McNeese, so you just don't know. But look, this is not, as we've said many times, this is not vintage Tim Tebow Florida or Danny Werfel Florida. It's not that kind of team. But what it is a team is it's a team that if you limit the mistakes, maybe Graham Mertz never lived up to the hype, okay, but he's not awful. He can get you places on certain days. Trevor Etienne, if he runs for 7.3 yards a carry every week against a defense like Tennessee's, you're going to have maybe a pretty nice season. And the defense, it's physical. It may not have a Javon Curse or somebody like that on it, but I thought that Florida played to an identity down in Gainesville on Saturday. And, is Florida going to go beating SEC teams 4 touchdowns? Probably not. But I think there's some wins to be had with what we saw.
I think definite wins to be had, and I think, I think you take it back to the first week. Utah's a solid team, man. And the SEC, the SEC, everyone here is the reason that we're on here is because we love SEC football and that's what we live and breathe and whatnot. But Utah's won the Pac-12, the Power 5 conference in back-to-back years. I don't care what conference you're playing in. That's impressive. And, I think, Florida, though, as you said, the vintage Florida that we all know, and to be honest with you, it was really fun to watch, beats Utah 100 times out of 100. And so I just think that's a tough pill to swallow when you do lose that game. But I mean, I just can't overemphasize how massive that win is, especially for Billy Napier. A rivalry game at home in the swamp. They're playing Can't Back Down with the lights out. I mean, that was as close to vintage Florida environment as we've seen in Napier's time. I would say, and so I think that, moving forward, Florida has to stack some wins. Can they go out there and steal one that we thought at the beginning of the year that they would lose? Can they go into Jacksonville and give Georgia a game? I'm not ready to say that game is going to be uber competitive or whatever it is, but now I think it's maybe a little bit more intriguing, to be honest with you. And can it moving forward if they, win a couple more games? But I can't overemphasize how a win like this can catapult a team forward. I've seen it in my playing years. I've seen it, with my own team. I've seen it with other teams. College football is all about momentum. And if Florida can use this game to gain some momentum and catapult themselves forward and win a couple games moving forward, I think that's something that could really, really help this team in the long run. That I'm not saying we're going to see him in Atlanta. I'm not saying we're going to see him in a New Year's Six Bowl or whatever it may be. But I think that, if Florida can go out there and win a couple games that we maybe thought they would lose at the beginning of the year, that could be a really good stepping stone for Napier.
Blake, what are we looking at here?
Hold on a second, Chris. I'll tell you what you're looking at. I'm going to tell you exactly what you're looking at. As soon as I can find it in our thing here, and boy, this is...
Well, let me tell you what you're looking at. An empty Chomps bag, because I picked myself up some Chomps from the local Kroger this weekend, and that bag is empty for a reason. The Lees went through that thing in a hurry. It didn't even last 24 hours, the whole bag. These things they're good. They got all kinds of good stuff in them, things that are not bad for you. This is a minority-owned business, operated in a manner where they try to bring you healthy snacks made from the finest ingredients, 9 flavors, something for everyone. I'm just getting into this. I tried the turkey ones this weekend. They were delicious. I've got some more ones up next on my list, but felt like a good time for the Chomps read. And again, this bag is empty for a reason. The product is really good, and we will have a promo code in our show notes so that you can try it for yourself, get a 15% discount, and help out the show. Okay, Blake. Probably the most significant win of the day was Florida's win over Tennessee, but maybe not. Eli Drinkwitz really needed a statement win. I thought that the Tigers got one over Kansas State and Columbia this weekend. Everybody pays attention to the Harrison Mevis kick at the end, 61, 62 yards. I'm not sure what the official distance was. I feel like I've heard both. Wonderful kick. Glad to see that kid getting a little redemption after a tough last season where he missed some easy kicks and so on. But, man, I watched Missouri's offense. As much as Mevis' kick got the attention, Brady Cook was as good as Brady Cook has been. They found a little something with him and Luther Burden. They're running the ball better. The defense is as good as we thought it would be so far, I think. We were a little bullish on Missouri coming in, Blake. Certainly what we saw this weekend, I think, supported that feeling. And maybe in some ways with Cook and the way they played that we didn't expect.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my Missouri 5-0 bowl prediction is hanging on by a thread these past couple weeks here, but they managed to pull it out. And I mean, it's always been about the offense, right? We said the whole thing coming in the season. We knew the defense was going to be fantastic, and against good teams, you're going to give up points and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, we had zero issues with the defense coming into the season. Like, there were none. Like we said, this is going to be a very good defense that will be able to control a lot of games. We'll have to win some lower scoring games. But yeah, I mean, it's offensively, you see what they can do. Like, you see what they're capable of. Brady Cook, you mentioned, I mean, 356 yards, 2 touchdowns. We saw, a big run from Schrader, which I feel like is kind of a recurring theme now, where you kind of get some of those breakaway type plays. But it came down to getting big plays. Like, that's the thing I talked about going into this game, was the only worry you had for Missouri was not on the defensive side. It was, were they going to be able to find enough big plays on offense? That was the question if they're going to win this game. And they answered it. Why? Because of what I just said. Schrader had a 36-yard run in this game. Burden, of course, had the 47-yard, he had 2 touchdowns. I mean, he's a home run threat on any play. And it's just a matter of getting to that point to where you put up those kind of numbers and everything starts to click. And we saw it click here. But it wasn't just him, right? There were a couple other guys that had 40-plus yard plays offensively. And so big plays can completely change the landscape of an entire game. Like, it's hard to win if you're just getting 3 yards here and 4 yards here. And sure, you can do it, but you're not going to put up probably the points needed to beat a top 15 team like Kansas State. And so I know everyone talks about, kind of the setup for the kick and everything, but the biggest talking point here should be that we saw what the Missouri offense is capable of, and we saw the different weapons that they have on this offense. They just have to regularly put them in a position to succeed, and they did that in this game.
Blake, you hit it on the head, man. It was the first time, we came into the season and we said, if Missouri's defense is going to play like that all year, their offense can be this much better. They're going to win a lot of games, and it's probably going to be the best year of Drinkwitz's career or tenure at Missouri. And so it's exactly what you said. I saw big plays. I saw explosives. It's hard to win when you're going 5 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards, 4 yards, because you have to methodically go down the field. I saw posts for 40-yard touchdowns. I saw swing passes that Luther Burden took to the house with great perimeter blocking, stuff that we haven't seen from Missouri's offense in recent years. And they still played well defensively. I don't know if it was one of their best defensive games, but played well enough to win. And this is definitely, Eli Drinkwitz's signature win so far at Missouri. And it's exactly what we just said with the Florida piece earlier. These games can catapult your locker room, can absolutely propel you forward in your season. It affects the psyche of your players. It affects locker room talk when you're in there, and it's not coaches. You spend 40 hours a week together, and that's not even including all the stuff that's outside the facility. There's a conversation going on amongst the team, and that conversation, the morale right now with both those teams, Florida, but in this case, Missouri for sure, is great. I mean, it's great. And the vibes are high, as a lot of people would say. At the same time, let's not forget, and it's funny to laugh at now, but this conversation would be a lot different about, how they almost blew the kick with the delay of game or whatever it was. If he doesn't make that 61-yard kick, our conversation this morning is a lot different. And so, but as you said, Chris, I'm happy for Mevis. Tough year last year. Obviously, is a maybe one of the more famous kickers in college football for other reasons, but we all think he's got a booming leg. And 61 yards. I mean, he kicked it on the other side of the 50-yard line. I mean, that's pretty awesome. And to see that go in and to see that scene in Columbia. And I love playing there. I think it may be one of the more underrated places in the SEC, to be honest with you. And that's made me feel like a big statement, but those fans are passionate, and honestly, they deserved it. And I'm happy for Mizzou.
Yeah, Missouri got just enough in the running game. I feel like Cody Schrader's been a little bit better back this year, average almost 6 yards a carry. Pete sometimes looks like their most explosive option, but didn't really have a great game. And Blake, you brought up something that I think I didn't realize till you brought it up, was how many explosive pass plays they got to different guys. They had Luther Burden, Mookie Cooper with receptions of 47 and 41. Theo Weiss Jr. had one for 26. Marquise Johnson had one for 42, and Brett Norfleet had one for 27. That's 5 guys that caught at least one pass for 25 yards or longer. Felt like last year when Luther Burden was making big plays, they were having to get it to him on an end around or whatever. Missouri just has to be a little bit better in the running game. And as we've said with Brady Cook all along, he can run it a little bit. That helps your offense. If he can just make a few big plays a game, hey, with that defense they've got, that is the recipe to winning some games. I think if I'm a Missouri fan, that's what I'm the most excited about this morning, is they're starting to do the things that they need to do for them to win football games, as balanced as that team is. And I think balance is a key, where you got a lot of teams we're talking about with some pretty significant holes coming out of this one. Now, I'm not saying Missouri is great in the running game. I'm not saying Brady Cook is an all-conference quarterback, but I didn't leave that game thinking Missouri had gaping holes. No, look, they've been mediocre against MTSU a lot of the game. South Dakota, not a team that was going to challenge him offensively. But sometimes guys don't get up for games until it's a game like this one. And I thought the way that Missouri answered the bell, the way that Missouri won the game, had to leave you encouraged about where that team is.
I mean, can you place a value on what a win like this does for that program too, when all you're hearing is about how you got Mr. 500 as your head coach and all this other stuff, and then you win a game like this, and now you're sitting here, like we said, with opportunity. And we keep laughing about the 5-0 start and all that, but like we're not laughing anymore. Like, it shouldn't be. Like, they've got a great chance to be 5-0 heading into a season-defining game against LSU at home. They get Memphis and Vanderbilt up next. Obviously, you got to win both those games. We saw the week before how close they came in the MTSU game, right? So it's not like this is a great win, but you still have to kind of keep that same level of confidence, and again, just the same level of, I don't know what the word is, just whatever they did offensively, you have to keep trying to replicate that. Like, you have to keep doing the same type of stuff. And yeah, I mean, momentum has swung in the direction, I think, of Eli Drinkwitz now, with all the talk about, his job and everything. But it's a long season, but man, you'll take a start like this with that kind of win. So
yeah, and it's the consistency. That's what it is right there. It's can they play at that level? It's the explosives that we saw over the top. And I remember preparing for Missouri, and as I said, talking with teammates. Obviously, I didn't prepare to face Missouri's offense because I was an offensive player. I was going against Missouri's defense. But talking with them and also seeing other film, you would see guys pack the box and not worry about playing back as much because they weren't worried about Missouri receivers running past them on posts and whatnot. Now you have to worry about that. And does that open up a whole other dimension of your offense? Man, I gotta give props where it is for Brady Cook, man. The kid played his tail off. And not only that, but he's playing with a little bit of swagger about him. He had a comment after the game that really fired me up, to be honest with you. Because I think, as us, although we haven't been maybe as critical of him as other people, or maybe Missouri fans in particular, but there's been public scrutiny of his play, and people are calling for Sam Horn, who's a highly touted recruit, to come replace him and whatnot. And I think Cook was even banged up in the game, to be honest with you. And the kid played his tail off, and said, "I love playing quarterback at the University of Missouri. It's my dream school. I wish other people felt that way too." And that fired me up a little bit, man. As a player, the kid's playing with a chip on his shoulder. Now he's got weapons, and he's got a defense that can back him up. And a confident, fearless playing quarterback with weapons is a dangerous game. I don't care where you're playing at. I don't care if you're playing at MTSU. I don't care if you're playing at Missouri. I don't care if you're playing at Georgia. That's a dangerous formula right there. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't give my props to Brady Cook after that game. But that's what it is, Blake. They got to find consistency moving forward, because 5-0 is possible. 6-0 LSU, that's the big one they got to win if they really want to reach new heights with their program. But Brady Cook, man, I tip my cap.
Blake, you had mentioned that LSU game on October 7th. I started doing a little looking ahead while you guys were talking, and just see, is that like a potential game day situation? Because I think Missouri's going to win its next two. Now, Memphis has got a tricky, tough defense, although Memphis hasn't played anybody yet, so we just don't know if that's legit or not. And that game will be, I think, in St. Louis. But I'm looking down, and I think the spoiler is going to be Oklahoma and Texas if both those teams remain unbeaten that day. But that's on I would have to think that's maybe, if you're an ESPN executive somewhere that's looking down the line for potential game day spots, You got Alabama, A&M. That probably lost some luster with both those teams losing a game, but that might be a dark horse candidate for an ESPN game day situation if Missouri can go into that one unbeaten. Washington State, UCLA, another one to maybe watch out for in the Pac-12. Both those two teams unbeaten, but just wanted to throw that one out there. Blake, I know we got a lot of stuff to cover. Ole Miss, I thought, looked good this weekend. We can maybe get into that. We got Alabama's quarterback situation. You're monitoring the chat. Where would you like to steer this one next?
Well, just quickly, guys. I know usually we do this a little bit earlier, but leave your thoughts, questions, comments. It's Monday. We gonna hand the show over to you after our initial big topics on Monday. So let us know what you want to talk about. And if some of you Arkansas fans, especially, have come in here. Yeah, sorry, Nathan. Nathan's already ready to move on to basketball, which you can check out our Arkansas basketball preview right here on Southeastern 14 if you would like to do that. But I know Arkansas fans not exactly thrilled about the situation there. And remember, you can leave a super chat. That helps the channel out as well, guys. Leave a super chat, donate to the channel. You can also join our Just Means More membership tier, $3.99 per month. That is just a donation to us here at Southeastern 14 to help us do these daily shows and make even more videos for you guys as well. So, we got a lot of fun stuff in the works here. And, let us know what you want to discuss. Chris, quickly do a little rapid fire on some different topics if you want here, and we'll get some more questions and comments.
I think. Sorry, I want to jump in too. I think we should talk about Arkansas. To be honest with you, that's an
and Ole Miss. We'll get to Ole Miss too.
Yeah.
We're not ignoring them.
Yeah, and I think Arkansas. Anytime you lose at home to an out of conference team, that bars discussion. And I think we all sat here as well earlier in the year, especially in some of the preseason conversations that we would have before we kicked off this year of college football. Is we all think that Sam Pittman fits the mold of Arkansas, is likable, but can he take him to the next level? Can they truly get over the hump and get to that other point? Losses at home to BYU are not going to do that. They're just not. At the same time, look, the SEC is good enough, maybe not this year, but historically is good enough to where if you lose an out-of-conference game, you can still play pretty well in the conference and find yourself in a pretty good spot by the end of the year. And that's why I don't overreact usually to out-of-conference losses, especially early in the year. But for this year in particular, I think it's going to be really interesting because it's the end of week 3. Alabama has a loss. LSU has a loss. Texas A&M has a loss. This is a little bit uncharted territory for this conference, to be honest with you fellas. And so, I think that, Arkansas has a loss now out of conference. All these losses are out of conference. The interconference play is going to be an absolute war because teams are desperate now. Teams are they already have a loss. They know that the margin for error. Teams can't lose a game in September, early October, and find themselves, playing well at the end of the year and maybe sneak into a New Year's Six of the college football playoff. It may not happen this year. Interconference play in this conference this year is going to be a war, and I'm really excited to see that. If Arkansas wants to take it to the next level, which the season's not over, a loss to BYU at home is a really tough look. Don't get me wrong, but if they want to go to the next level, man, they gotta win some big games interconference. I'm talking LSU. I'm talking A&M. They got to win some big games to take themselves to the next level. If Sam Pittman especially kind of wants to hear this noise disappear a little bit.
Yeah, I think one thing, and I saw this at Saturday Down South this morning. I can't remember whose playoff picks they were, but the SEC was left out of somebody's forecast. Now, look, it is ridiculous to do that in the middle of September, but that's what people do for fun. And I think part of it, Gavin, you just touched on. It is the SEC failing to take care of business outside of the conference again and again and again. Thank you to Missouri for saving the league's bacon this weekend, but just so many disappointments. And you also mentioned Arkansas, and yes, offensive line issues, which is a little surprising given who your head coach is, Arkansas, and the fact that he was an offensive line coach. But you got two teams, and this is a good segue to Ole Miss. You got two teams in this league. I think coming into the season, you had an argument the best two players in this league might be Rocket Sanders and Quinshon Judkins. Well, Sanders is out. I haven't looked up an update on this one going into the show. Arkansas is really struggling to run the ball without him. Again, I think it's more than just his absence. They have other quality guys who could have stepped up and have played well in the past who are not necessarily doing that. Again, maybe the offensive line rather than the backs, but that's number one. On the other hand, you have Ole Miss. Look, Quinshon Judkins has not really had a good game yet, guys. Didn't have a really good game Saturday. Ole Miss is rolling, and Ole Miss is doing it without some of its better receivers. I get that Ole Miss does not have a marquee win yet, but Georgia Tech is not a pushover. Tulane's certainly not a pushover. What Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss are doing right now with injuries and an underperformance from Quinshon Judkins, I think it's just the lack of the marquee win that is doing it. But my goodness, I think that team is becoming one we need to talk about, and I think that game in Tuscaloosa this weekend is going to be fascinating.
No, it's fascinating, but it's also absolutely massive for what Ole Miss wants to do this year. And everything we just talked about in the previous segment of Alabama has a loss, LSU has a loss, A&M has a loss. Doors wide open. Doors wide open. If there's a year for Ole Miss to take advantage and catapult themselves into a possible game in Atlanta at the end of the year, this is the year. But it starts with winning that game this weekend in Tuscaloosa. Kiffin and Dart are just firing on all cylinders right now. I mean, they're in perfect sync with what they're doing. Judkins hasn't played well. He didn't even play this past week. I think that Dart runs for 136 yards. I saw runs for 136 yards as a quarterback. And not only that, but he's throwing touchdowns left and right. And
their passing efficiency is crazy good. I think that's the thing that's being under talked about with them is because they can run the ball, but Jackson Dart has taken a couple steps up without even some of his best guys, Gavin.
Yeah, and that's what it was, man. That's exactly it, Chris. And we sat here at the beginning of the year, and I questioned. I was like, why did why did Ole Miss bring in Spencer Sanders, a kid who threw for uber amount of yards at Oklahoma State, has basically every school record in the book over there in Stillwater. They bring him in. We all thought that Dart was the unquestioned starter. This is a masterclass by Kiffin. He brought him in, and it's elevated Dart's play. It's absolutely elevated Dart's play. Competing in practice, competing all of fall camp in the off season. He's on another level right now. And I think that we maybe had initial questions of, is there doubts with Dart because they're bringing in Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State? I think we can look back now and say, I don't think there was ever a doubt, but really it was just Kiffin bringing him in to push Dart a little bit in competition and practice or whatever it may be. And I got to applaud him for that because that's risky business, man. Some kids don't react well to that. Some kids don't react well to that, especially if you kind of give them the keys to your offense and your program. But man, I got to give it up to Kiffin and Dart right now because Dart's elevated his level of play. There's obviously a little bit of better marriage between Kiffin and Dart as well. And if Kiffin and his quarterback are firing on all cylinders, man, that's going to give any defensive coordinator a headache.
But by the way, Judkins did play this weekend, just didn't play well, averaged under 3 yards a carry. Ulysses Bentley was the better running back of the two. I didn't get to see that game, so I think
he was beat up, though. I think he was pretty hurt because I think before the game, Kiffin said he would be surprised if he played. So I apologize. He did play. But I think that, as you said too, Chris, we haven't seen nearly what we saw last year yet with Quinshon Judkins. Now what's going to happen when he does? What's going to happen when he does go out and has that breakout game for 160, 180 yards and their passing efficiency? I mean, that Ole Miss, man, this is I don't want to say, this is the year, this is to do it, but I mean, the door's open. The door's open in Oxford.
Yeah, next 4 games at Alabama, LSU, Arkansas, at Auburn. So,
and then Georgia later.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of defining stretch, like, this is it.
Yes.
Moving forward, if you're just talking about the SEC West race, I'm not, obviously, they still got to play A&M and Mississippi State after that, but this is kind of that defining stretch given the teams involved. So, yeah.
All right, guys, I want to talk quarterbacks in the Yellowhammer State for just a minute. That's Alabama and Auburn for people who are not familiar with state nicknames, and then we'll maybe do a rapid fire on some topics we didn't hit on. Probably won't have time to hit everything today, but hey, we got 4 shows later in the week to do that. So if you don't have your topic covered today, chances are we'll get to it. Before we do that, a quick shout to one of our sponsors, MyPerfectFranchise.net, that is owned by my friend Eddie Ludicky. What they do is they sit down with you, and this costs you nothing, They try to get an inventory of your skills, your personality, your goals for your family. Some of us have kids. We don't like to work all the time. And what Andy does is he's got a network of franchises that he works with, and he will try to match your skills, what you want out of your life, with their franchises that they work with. They do not get a bigger cut for steering you here or there. They do it in good conscience. They try to match you with the place that is ideal for you and your needs. Go check out myperfectfranchise.net. My friend Andy Ludicky will speak with you again free of charge to take an assessment of your situation. Great guys, high character, excuse me. Go to myperfectfranchise.net and find out more if you're looking for a career change and are open to the possibility of owning a franchise. Okay, quarterbacks in the state of Alabama. Obviously, that discussion starts with the University of Alabama. That game against that game against South Florida was just an abomination to Fort Pass. I don't know why Tyler Buckner was ever thought to be the answer. Ty Simpson played better. Jalen Milroe, maybe not so reading between the lines, did not react well to being benched, did not play in that one. Guys, I think that either it's going to have to be Simpson. And look, let's be fair to Ty Simpson. He was a highly rated kid who hasn't seen a ton of time. Or they've got to go back to Milroe, maybe put more emphasis on the running game. I don't know what the answer is. That's why he's Nick Saban and I'm not. But I don't think Tyler Buckner is the answer. And I just couldn't believe at times what I was watching in Tampa this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the way we hyped this game up was this is the bounce back spot. I saw people everywhere. It's like whatever, Alabama was favored by 30 plus or something. Like this is lock of the week territory. Like this is what they do after they come off of a loss, right? They just come out and just destroy people. But yeah, I mean, that didn't happen. And for a while there, you're wondering not just are they going to play well enough, to push the lead out? Are they going to play well enough to win the game?
To win.
Like that became, the question. And that's not something that we expected, which is why I said I'd put that at the top in terms of surprises from the weekend, probably. We talked about going in. I think Blaine mentioned one of the things. Alabama had to run the ball better to have success. They had to run the ball better because they didn't have any other choices. The passing game wasn't an option, so they had to run the ball. There's no choice. And the good news is they're talented enough in that running back room to probably still beat some teams just running the ball. But you can't do that in the SEC games, right? You're not going to be able to get away with that and have that same type of success. And so, Chris, we did the power rankings. They'll go up at 12:30 Central. You guys will have a lot of fun with that as usual. I'm sure the rankings are exactly the way you see them, but still, I mean, we said it's like there are some teams that are probably ranked ahead of Alabama or behind Alabama right now that feel like they have issues that can be fixed. I don't know if this can be fixed this season. Like, based on what we've seen thus far, do we really have the confidence that this is going to be completely fixed? Because what else do they do, right? They played everyone that they have. If they don't have any confidence in any of the three, then it's early. Guys can get better, and guys do get better under Saban, but I don't know. It's not the start that we expected, even though, what did we say coming the season? We had more questions about this Alabama team than we feel like we have in a long time. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they were to this extent after that kind of game, which, remember, it is just one game, but it's coming off the Texas game where you're having the same discussion. So,
yeah, I think, I'm trying to put this all under one umbrella and kind of summarize a bit here, because I feel like we could talk. This could be its all own show too, to be honest. But I think as an Alabama fan, you wake up after week 3 and you maybe feel a little bit more confused after you did after the Texas game in week 2, to be honest with you. And I think that's really uncharted territory in Tuscaloosa. And, I think you look at the quarterback situation and you say, okay, let's look at, they've had an unbelievable run. Tua, Jalen Hurts, Mac Jones, Bryce Young. These guys are all starters in the NFL right now. That doesn't happen at any other program in the country. At the same time, you went this year when they took. I'm telling you, when they took Buckner after the spring ball period as a transfer, they showed their hand that they weren't comfortable with Simpson or Milroe as their starting quarterback. And where do you go from here? To be honest with you, I think you go back with Milroe, and I think the team for sure, fans absolutely, because everyone has their own opinion and whatnot. But I think that there's a little bit of their minds are in a blender a little bit here with the quarterback situation, and where do we go moving forward? I think you go back with Milroe. You go back with Milroe and you tweak the offense. He's not Bryce Young. He's not Tua. He's not Jalen Hurts. He's not going to sit back there and throw for 350, 400 yards and carry your offense through the air down the field. Now, he's an unbelievable athlete. We all know that. We've seen it, and he's shown flashes where you're like, holy smokes, this guy can absolutely play. They need to taper the offense more to him. They need to just roll with it and try to find some rhythm offensively, because right now they just look totally out of whack, running the ball, throwing the ball, and they got to find some rhythm before anything, because otherwise you're going to look up and it's going to be week 5, week 6, and you're sitting there with 2. Do I dare say they have 3 losses by then? I don't know, but they got to find some type of rhythm first. They do. They got to find some type of rhythm offensively, because right now they have, and I'm just shocked that I'm saying this about a Nick Saban team. They have no identity, especially on the offensive side of the ball. No identity. And they have no rhythm and attack down the field. And so they got to find a way to do that. And what I do think they should do, they should go back. Now, this is my opinion, but go back with Milroe, tweak the offense to what he does best, and find a way to win these games. They're not the juggernaut they've been previously. Let's just call it what it is. They're not. They don't have the talent there to do it, especially at the quarterback position and the really important positions that can lead to big wins in the standard that we've all seen vintage Alabama be in the past. But they gotta find some rhythm right now, because right now, I'm telling you, that locker room in Tuscaloosa, their heads are spinning as players. It happens.
Well, one other one where we could have seen a change. I don't know that we learned. I don't know how much we learned about Peyton Thorne this weekend. Good stat line, threw for 282, ran for $123, 2 touchdowns rushing, 1 passing, but 2 interceptions. The Robbie Ashford should be the quarterback narrative. It gained a little bit of momentum. And so I think Peyton Thorne, at least by the way he played, should have held that off for 1 more week. I think Pro Football Focus graded him out pretty well too. Auburn really hasn't played much of anybody yet. I think this game at Texas A&M is going to be telling. The Aggies should have one of the better pass defenses in the country. We know about the struggles against Miami. But I thought it was interesting that Peyton Thorne, look, if Robbie Ashford is going to be their quarterback eventually, and I'm not saying he should be or shouldn't be, but I think that if that was going to happen, Peyton Thorne didn't leave the door super cracked, I guess. At least he didn't open the door after the way he played against Sanford this weekend, guys.
I mean, Chris, I'm going to say about Auburn what I said in the Power Rankings video, and I hate to repeat myself, but I just don't. Auburn to me is, I don't want to say the same as Kentucky, but they're very similar in that I don't know what I'm supposed to have a strong feeling about just yet for those two teams, because I look at, again, they've won all 3 games, and that's nice, but I just think now we've seen, right? It's so different once you start playing, better teams, and we've seen that for some of these teams that just kind of had a rude awakening once that happens. And so I just don't. I think we're going to be talking about the Auburn quarterback situation the rest of the season. I agree. I just think it's going to happen. I think that's going to be a main storyline the rest of the way. And I don't know that any of us ever felt confident, even after the way they started, that this was ever going to be something where we just felt completely, all in on whoever, one or the other. I just don't think that was ever going to happen. So I will have a lot more thoughts on Auburn after this game. Donovan, I know you probably wanted a hot take. I'm sorry, but I'll have a lot more on Auburn after I see how they look against Texas A&M on Saturday, which again presents opportunities, right? Because we talk about a team in A&M who had tackling issues against Miami and all this other stuff, and feel like there's things to exploit there. But can this Auburn team exploit it? I don't know, based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, the interconference games, there's just they're different. Obviously, the quality of team you're playing is different, but the energy in the stadium is risen a little bit. difference games. And I think that we're really going to see. Don't get me wrong. Is Auburn, do they like where they're at? Probably. I mean, I would. New coach, new quarterback. Sitting 3-0 now, feeling good about yourself. But these interconference games, you're right, Blake. We're gonna learn a lot about this Auburn team. We're gonna learn a lot about Hugh Freeze and how he interacts with his team. We're gonna learn a lot at the quarterback position with Thorne and Robbie Ashford. Is that going to be a discussion? I agree with you. I think it's going to be something we're going to be talking about for a while this season, because I don't think either of the guys are elite quarterbacks that we've seen at Auburn, and kind of these campus legends that Auburn and Jordan Hare makes. But I do think that's kind of what you get in the first year, transfer quarterback situation is, you're still trying to build your team, build your roster. That guy usually comes after you kind of build some momentum on the recruiting trail. And so I think that's the elite play at the quarterback position is coming for Auburn. I don't think it's happening this year, which is why I do think they will. I don't want to say struggle, because I don't know if they'll lose a bunch of games, but those interconference games will look a lot different than those first three for Auburn.
Yeah, shout out to our man Donovan. He's one of the originals with us, isn't he? I mean, I can't remember a time where Donovan wasn't with us.
Donovan's been here hating on my Auburn basketball takes for a long time now, and so he's been with us for quite a while. We appreciate Donovan. So, all right, Chris, we got about 5 minutes here, so we're gonna just do some quick rapid fire, and real quickly, Jordan, can you get a prediction for Auburn, Texas A&M? You absolutely can. Coming up later this evening, whenever we put out that video that Chris and Blaine have already done on our preview for the Auburn Texas A&M game. As usual, we put our previews out pretty early in the week, guys. We put them out on Mondays because we just kind of give you our initial thoughts. We update them throughout the week now that we do all these daily shows. So, all those SEC games will be up this evening. So you'll get a prediction and all of that's in that video. But yeah, Donovan, been here since 2021. Yeah, yep. That's when we started.
When we started.
It's been here for a while. One of the originals for sure. All right, quickly, we're going to run through some of these. I think this was a good one from Jason. And this may be a much longer discussion than we have for a quick topic, but I'm going to at least put it up here. Why are so many offenses having trouble this year?
My initial thought is maybe the quarterback play isn't as good as we thought. You're seeing some offensive line struggles. Gavin, I mean, you were playing this league a year ago. What are you seeing when you watch games?
I think it's that as well. And you look at now. I think after this weekend you can say it's Jaden Daniels, but then who's the best quarterback in the SEC? Yeah, I'm not real sure, to be honest with you. There's not the elite level play at that position that we've seen, and when you do have elite level play at that position, at that one position, it elevates everybody else on your offense. And I think that's something that we're maybe missing this year. But that's why when you watch LSU and Jaden Daniels plays well, LSU's offense plays really well and scores lots of points. When he plays average, the offense looks average. And so the team goes as the quarterback goes, especially when the guy has the potential to play at a really high level.
All right. Let's see what else we got here. Donovan's from earlier. We think we kind of touched on Florida, but we can just kind of maybe moving forward on the Gators. Fool's gold, or I don't think any of us are all in on Florida just after that. But
no,
I think we feel significantly better about the Gators than we did before. There's no question, right?
Yeah. No,
well, they showed you an identity and a path, guys. That's the thing. I don't think the margin for error is going to be huge. I don't think we're going to be sitting here seeing Florida steamroll the rest of the league, but control the clock, play good defense, don't make mistakes. You can win some games in this league because it's more down than we thought. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fair. I think also too, like with the league being down at the top, I'm saying with Alabama, with LSU, how they looked in week one, these aren't the juggernauts that we've seen who can steamroll anybody in this conference or in this country, really, to be honest. That leaves the door open for these teams that have kind of been middle of the tier these past couple of years. Florida, Arkansas, Ole Miss, can they elevate their play and find a way to sneak into Atlanta by the end of the year? We'll see. I'm not all in on Florida either. I'm not, but I'm definitely feel a lot better about them than I did before this game this past weekend.
Speaking of Florida, hello, Father. Is Graham Mertz the best quarterback in the SEC? By the way, this is not my father, but he's asking. I don't think I would rank Graham Mertz as the best quarterback just yet, but if you would like to do that, Father, then you may. Let's see what else we've got here. Does Arkansas make it interesting this weekend? Whew. I don't know, guys. My confidence in that is going in the wrong direction for the Hogs, I think.
Do we have a Rocket Sanders update?
Yeah, we need that for sure.
I didn't see. Maybe I didn't look hard enough this morning, but I think that would seem to be important if that's to happen.
Yeah. Yep. We'll see about that. All right, Chris. I think I know we didn't hit on everything, guys, but as always, remember, we get a lot of people in the chat, and so the best way to stand out is to give us a super chat. That's the best way to get your comment highlighted on the screen. Again, for the daily shows moving forward, if you want to leave us a super chat, we will get to those, I promise, because you are donating to our channel, and we appreciate you guys as always. But again, prediction videos coming up for all the SEC games. They will be out Monday and Tuesday at the latest. They've already been recorded. We just got to get them up. And then we'll have our previews for the other games as well, involving FBS on FBS. Not as many this week, but we will get to those. And again, we appreciate you guys joining us. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Always helps us out. And remember, if you are open to sponsoring or know someone that wants to sponsor our channel, any of the shows that we have on the channel, reach out on the bottom there, caroline.smith@southeastern14.com.
Yeah, to reiterate some things Blake said, sponsorship is very important. That's how we get paid. That's how we keep this thing alive. We've got a really quickly growing audience. Second of all, if we didn't get to your topics today, that's why we have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're here 5 days a week from 11 to noon Central. So if you're new to us, you can watch us every day. Then that, in addition to predictions, to power rankings, to things we don't do live, that in addition to I think we've had a Saturday reaction show each of the last 3 weeks at some point. So we're hitting all kinds of stuff. We have to hold a few things back every now and then. Can't hit everything every day. So that, yeah, and Blake, as you said, at basketball stuff coming up. But yeah, lots of fun to be had this week. It was an interesting week. Going to be an interesting week 4 ahead. Can't wait to get there. So anyway, unless you guys have parting thoughts, and if you do, raise your hand. I guess that means no. So for Blake Lovell and Gavin Schoenwald, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We will see you again Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Oh, by Fridays now, I think it's going to be Trey Wallace Day. I think he's going to be joining us every Friday, and I think for the full hour. So looking forward to that. Anyway, thank you for watching us at Southeastern 14. We will see you again soon.